Due to an error in the recording, the first several slides of this presentation have been re-recorded. Welcome to H-GAC's 2015 Transportation Improvement Program Call for Projects Workshop. During this presentation, we will cover an overview for the call for projects, including the evaluation process and sponsor responsibilities for information that they will be required to submit. We will overview the application process, including materials that sponsors will need to complete, and we will close out the session with a question and answer session. For those of you who may not be familiar with H-GAC or its role in transportation planning for the Houston region, H-GAC houses the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the Houston-Galveston area, which is an 8-county region, Harris County, and the 7 surrounding counties. We help facilitate transportation decision-making, including the allocation of federal funds for many transportation enhancements in this region. One of the key products that H-GAC is responsible for producing is the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. The TIP is a 4-year program of transportation projects, and it's where funds, including federal, state, and local funds, are assigned to the implementation of projects. This is where a commitment is formalized to advance the project to construction, typically. It is the implementation device for a long-range plan that H-GAC also is responsible for. We refer to this plan as the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. The TIP is multimodal. It covers not just roadway improvements, but also bicycle pedestrian enhancements and transit projects, some freight investments, and other projects that improve the surface transportation system in our region. I will note that transit funds, I'll cover this in just another slide, are typically handled through a joint process with transit agencies. The lead transit agencies for this decision-making in our region include Houston Metro, jointly the cities of Conroe and the Woodlands Township, and TxDOT. The TIP is multi-jurisdictional. It includes not just TxDOT or state investments, but local investments from our counties and our cities, as well as special purpose districts, including management districts and the like. This document is approved by our Transportation Policy Council, which is comprised mostly of elected officials and key transportation agency officials. We are currently operating under the new 2015 to 2018 TIP, and programs in this TIP largely reflect the last 2 years of our previous TIP cycle. Again, it's a 4-year process, and 2 years typically overlap between each document. In addition to the last 2 years from our previous document, it includes known project commitments for 2017 and 2018. The document must be fiscally constrained to reasonably available revenues, and we do this in a number of ways. For the funds entering into the TIP call process, and those funds coming through TxDOT, we look to their Unified Transportation Program, or UTP. This is a state-developed 10-year program of projects and funding allocations. And for our region, a number of programs are sub-allocated for decision-making. The Surface Transportation Program Metropolitan Mobility, or STPMM, program is sub-allocated to our region. The Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, or CMAQ program, and the STP TAP, or Transportation Alternatives Program. All 3 of those programs are sub-allocated to our region, and the Policy Council takes the lead in decision-making surrounding those programs. The document is also constrained by federal transit apportionments for funds that come to us through the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA. Again, I will note that those programs are typically administered through a designated recipient in our region, and for the core Houston area, that is Houston Metro serves in that function. for the urban area north of town in Woodlands and Conroe area. The City of Conroe and Woodlands Township take on that role, and TxDOT is the designated recipient for all other areas in our region, though we do look we do work very closely with Gulf Coast Center and Island Transit, among others, to develop transit programs in Galveston and Brazoria County, for example. Again, those resources are not being allocated through this TIP call process. In addition to federal or state revenues that may come through the TIP process, there are local commitments to projects. Again, the document includes regionally significant projects regardless of their funding source. So, for example, Harris County Toll Road Authority or the Fort Bend County Toll Road Authority making investments in their roadway infrastructure. We recognize those projects in our TIP and long-range plan. The TIP must be consistent with the long-range RTP and our air quality conformity finding on that plan. And this really affects the timing of some major projects. The funds available for our call are about $200 million to be allocated, again, from those core set of funding sources, the STPMM, CMAQ, and TAP programs. We'll cover this in more detail in a later slide. You will now begin listening to the remainder of the recording from our original webinar. Thank you for joining us. In general, the call for projects process is initiated through our work with our subcommittees, the Technical Advisory Committee, and the Policy Council to establish evaluation criteria and the process that we'll be following through the call for projects. Then we seek their approval to initiate a call for projects, which we have now done. After the call for projects application period generally runs about 60 days, we will complete the review of those applications, follow up with sponsors regarding any missing information and complete applications, any follow-up questions that need to be answered before we can bring the projects to our TIP subcommittee and our Technical Advisory Committee to review and begin to make recommendations. Again, ultimately the Policy Council is the entity that will approve any funding commitments made through this call for projects. Those of you who have participated in previous calls for projects, I'm going to open up a poll question here in a moment to try to see what y'all's experience has been under those previous calls. Maybe familiar with how we've done things in the past. And this slide is really just to highlight a few of the changes that you may see if you haven't been engaged with our committees and been following along closely. Again, a couple of calls ago, we spent quite a bit of time working with our Policy Council to identify funding allocation guidance. If you're familiar with it was a division along really the mobility and roadway category, other modes, which included transit and bicycle pedestrian investments, air quality, and other kind of planning project development activities. And it gave us kind of brackets, our funding ranges, allocation ranges that we should largely try to stay within, that they were comfortable moving forward with. We're proposing to retain that guidance and not make any changes to it at this time. We are looking to separate out within the process larger and smaller investments. We're calling these major investments and other investments. And the key distinction between the two is the level of environmental review that's required, as well as I mentioned before, is the project subject to conformity or not. The key distinction there is, does the project add significant capacity for vehicles or for transit on a fixed guideway? Beyond that, most projects are exempt from conformity. I would anticipate some folks may have some questions about, is their project exempt or not, and we can absolutely help you answer that question. That's the first question. The second question is, what environmental documentation is appropriate for the project? If it is eligible to use what's referred to as a categorical exclusion, or essentially there's no significant impacts that are expected from the project, and limited environmental review is required. It's eligible for a CE. Otherwise, more enhanced analysis is required either through an environmental assessment, EA, or an environmental impact statement, EIS. Both of those documents require additional time to develop and have more significant coordination and consultation processes associated with them. So we're using those two questions to try to define whether a project moves forward as a major investment or an other investment. And the distinction there really says that other investments don't require a whole lot of documentation. We can move them in time. They're not subject to our conformity process. So we should be able to move forward with them fairly quickly. And we want to make sure that our valuation reflects that and is not onerous and is as simplified as possible. The major investments, we want to know a little bit more about them and understand how they address all of our long-range plan goals. I'll cover that in just a moment, but that's safety, congestion, state of good repair or asset management. What are we doing to improve the quality and condition of our system? How does the project advance economic competitiveness in our region, as well as improvements or best practices that may be incorporated in the project for environmental or cultural reasons. We're also looking to incorporate best practices from our project development workshops. We conducted 2 workshops this past year, the first of which was targeted towards elected officials, the second of which was focused towards practitioners, county, city engineers, consultants and the like that are on the ground preparing environmental documentation and developing designs for projects. We were able to bring TxDOT and a number of our other agency partners together for these workshops, and I think we gained a lot of perspective on what the key obstacles are towards effectively advancing a project, particularly the timeliness of advancing a project. And we've tried to incorporate some of the lessons learned from those workshops within our process so that we can better understand and work with our sponsors to set a good expectation for everybody on how a project should and can move forward. There is a question really quick that talked about and asked about our exempt and CE eligible projects based on the grantee's experience with similar projects. I think the answer to that is going to be yes. I think if there's any gray area, we may want to seek a little consultation to make sure we're certain about that. But in general, yes, the grantee's experience or the applicant's experience with that would be very relevant to that decision. The screen you're seeing right now, again, kind of demonstrates the carryover of the guidance we received from our Policy Council. You'll see that on the left. That provides those ranges of funding to the 4 main activity areas: mobility, alternative modes, air quality, and planning. And you can see the funding ranges that are provided. So the bulk of the funds being committed to mobility projects, and then lesser amounts to alternative mode and air quality projects. Again, this is really referencing 2 core funding sources that are allocated to our region: the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality and Surface Transportation Program Metropolitan Mobility, or STPMM programs, and does not carry over to other funding sources that may be committed solely to mobility or alternative mode uses. You'll see the breakdown between major and other investments with some examples provided to the right of what might fit within those categories. So again, with the mobility area, major capacity improvements or interchanges on our core roadway network, mostly highway improvements, would go under that major category. Other investments may be more focused on individual intersections or adding raised medians or other safety enhancements to a corridor, along with incident management and, of course, ITS investments. Under alternative mode, on the major side, we're talking there about, again, fixed guideway transit investments. So that would be a dedicated bus lane, a light rail, or commuter rail kind of project, or some significant joint development project that will require additional environmental documentation. The other investments, again, are focused on smaller projects with more limited potential for impacts. so typically sidewalk or other pedestrian enhancements, bicycle projects, particularly those that access transit, as well as some park and ride lots and transit centers where we already have the property again, there's limited opportunity for impacts associated with the project. Under our air quality area, most of these programs are ongoing and managed by H-GAC itself, the exception there being the regional van pool program, Metro Star van pool that Metro administers. But these are ongoing programs that we generally see come forward. The major side, we do have a question mark there. There is a potential, perhaps maybe a partner wants to come forward with a major refueling or recharging infrastructure project, something like that. We wanted to leave open the opportunity for considering that. And then planning, again, our case-by-case investments. We have a couple of programs we've continued at H-GAC, our sub-regional planning initiative, supporting thoroughfare planning, our livable centers initiative studies, access management studies. Those kind of programs move forward often with funding through this process allocated from the STPMM program. So how much funding are we talking about committing, and how are we thinking about allocating it? If you'll notice, the TIP covers 4 years, again 2015 through 2018, and in our last call we started making some commitments beyond this time frame. We are looking to continue that practice and move beyond just programming the first 4 years and start programming projects that may be implemented beyond that time period in the latter part of, again, that 10-year Unified Transportation Program. We are cognizant of the need for flexibility, and we have these calls every 2 years, so we don't want to limit our opportunities for selecting projects in the next call. So we're looking to commit at most 50% of the funds in that latter half of the 10-year time frame. Again, these are projects that would begin their development in the early part of the TIP, but construction just might not fit within the latter, within the 4-year time frame. There are a number of projects that require at least 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 or 5 to get developed, and quite frankly, our process doesn't really allow those projects to advance within 4 years. We're often really, by the time we're done with the call, we only have 2.5 years left before the end of the 4-year TIP cycle. So we're looking to add a little flexibility there and make sure projects can move forward on a rational and really reasonable schedule and still compete for funding. So how much funds are we looking to make available in this call? This graphic has a lot of numbers on it, so my apologies. Again, you'll be able to review the recording and the PowerPoint slides after this webinar. But on the left, you'll see the 4 years of the TIP and the breakdown between our CMAQ, STPMM, and STP TAP. Again, the Transportation Alternatives Program was created under the most recent federal Surface Reauthorization Bill, MAP 21. And some of the funds, this used to be the TE, or Transportation Enhancements Program, some of you may have been familiar with, but now there is a statutory requirement that half of the funds are sub-allocated to urban areas in each state. So we are able to move forward with making decisions, directly selecting projects, and not having to wait for a statewide program call as has been the case in the past. So you'll see roughly just about $200 million, again, being available in the 4 years of the TIP to advance projects with those core resources that are allocated to our region. You'll see below 2 categories I've labeled mobility only. Category 2 funds, that's TxDOT speak for on-system mobility projects, as well as our estimate of the Proposition 1 revenues that may be available to our region. Again, this is a conservative estimate, largely based on the work TxDOT and a stakeholder committee that they pulled together over the last 2 months have come up with, and looking at the amount of funds that could be eligible for the Policy Council to direct the use of. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail on that at this time. If you have questions, by all means, we can follow up later. But this is a very conservative estimate. We hope to have more funds than this available should the voters pass Proposition 1 next month. In the latter 5 years, again, we're looking at that constraint of about 50% of the available funds being made available. So you can see it's quite a bit more funding that may be available for commitments, about $500 million between our core programs, and an additional $350 million from Category 2 and Proposition 1. Again, these are limiting amounts. This does not guarantee that just because we have projects available to commit that a recommendation might be made to utilize all of these funds. That will be up to the review process in our committees and ultimately the Policy Council to make those commitment decisions. This is the current schedule that we're looking at for the call. Again, we've had an authorization from our Policy Council. We've conducted the first workshop and this webinar. The application period is technically open. Again, I apologize. We're working with our website folks to develop an online application, and it just isn't ready to post just yet. We want to make sure that all the logic works appropriately. So look for that to come up probably the middle of next week. We are aware that that may put some folks in a bit of a bind. The City of Houston in particular, there's a requirement that project sponsors provide them with early information regarding their applications so that the city can kind of bring them in and decide whether it's an application the city wants to support or not. We'll be providing them, I'm almost completed with it, an Excel version of the application so that they can fill out that information and provide it to the city. I believe the deadline they have currently established is next week. In fact, is October 16th, and we can provide you with the contact information of that person to make sure you can be connected if you have that issue. We'll be, again, the application period will be open through at least the middle of December. I don't know that we have a particular issue today with the 15th being the deadline. We will continue to monitor that and see if an adjustment is necessary, but at this point, no change. It'll be the December 15th will be the close date. During the latter half of December and into the month of January, we'll be conducting our staff reviews and following up with project sponsors to complete any analyses or missing information that may be needed. Again, one change, I'll highlight this in more detail later, having a scoping meeting for those major investment projects with TxDOT. If you have not already conducted a scoping meeting, we'll be looking to schedule one in this time frame. This will make sure that we understand all the relevant project components and the level of environmental investigation that will be required for them, so we can make sure the schedule that could be considered is appropriate, as well as if any major items are missing from the project scope. In the month of February, we'll be working with the TIP subcommittee to develop recommendations, hopefully go up for a public comment period in March into April, and then have our Policy Council approve those funding commitments in April and or May. So that, again, is our current schedule. Again, I noticed, I mentioned this early on in our presentation, we will be having weekly Q&A webinars to allow for discussion of any issues and updates that may be coming forward. I've looked at my schedule in particular and some others here at H-GAC, and Monday afternoons at 2 p.m. look to be the best. I think this will allow us to address any issues early in each week and continue to work with sponsors throughout the remainder of the application period. So pretty much every Monday starting October 20th at 2 p.m. We'll be gathering here through this same mechanism, through the same platform to have any Q&A sessions that may be necessary. The one exception there is November 4th, a Tuesday, versus November 3rd on the Monday. All right, I'm going to spend a little bit of time walking through the project evaluation process. Again, for the major investment projects, then these are the projects that are subject to conformity or require enhanced environmental evaluation. They require an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. We're looking for a benefit cost analysis and narrative for each regional transportation plan goal. Again, those goals being safety, congestion, asset management operations, often called state of good repair, economic competitiveness, and environmental and cultural issues. The benefit cost analysis is pretty straightforward for each of them, looking at accident saving costs for safety, travel time savings for congestion, operating cost savings or life cycle cost savings on the asset management. Again, in that context, we're talking about rebuilding a facility may be more cost effective over the life cycle than continuing to maintain it each year. Economic competitiveness, looking at what the investment in the transportation infrastructure might do to property value, of course in excess of the investment cost, as well as any employment changes that may be created or retained within our region. I'll note this, most of our analysis here and guidance is aligned with the TIGER process that USDOT uses. Some of you may be familiar with that. This is one area that there is a bit of a difference in the employment side. From the national perspective, it's kind of zero-sum. Where that investment occurs, they view that as kind of a zero-sum on the employment side. It's just a transfer between regions. For us, we're only a small part of the region, of the nation, and the state is very focused through its other economic development activities on jobs created and retained. So we wanted to show some alignment there. On the environment side, benefit cost would focus on emissions reductions. In addition to the benefit cost analysis, again, some projects, some of these individual pieces may not make a whole lot of sense. They may not demonstrate a whole lot of benefit. We wanted to provide the opportunity for sponsors to provide a narrative discussion of elements of the project that may be relevant to safety, congestion, asset management, economic competitiveness, or environmental issues. So for example, on safety, talking about what improvements are being made to the design of the facility that may be not directly related to or captured within the reduction of accidents, as well as management strategies. This bleeds also into the congestion area. Are we using some management strategies to basically get the most out of the asset that we're improving? Same thing for asset management operations, economic competitiveness, and environmental issues. Again, providing as flexible a framework as possible for sponsors to communicate the benefits their projects could provide to our region. Once the applications have been submitted, staff will work with the sponsors to summarize the benefit cost in the narrative to try to explain or communicate how each project really addresses each of those RTP goals. There may be some that the benefit cost or the narrative really helps explain that it's a very high benefit. Even if the benefit cost may be low, the narrative may really demonstrate a very high or high benefit. We'll also, folks like to have a single number to look at to compare projects. We will be providing an overall benefit cost evaluation that is weighted across the 5 RTP goals. You can see that on your screen. The safety and congestion goals being the primary factors for consideration, state of good repair or asset management being a little bit less highly weighted, and economic competitiveness and environmental issues rounding out the picture. Okay, beyond those major investment projects, again, we have the other investment projects. So again, these are projects that are both exempt from conformity and are eligible to use a categorical exclusion for environmental document purposes. Our subcommittees worked very hard to update the evaluation criteria. Many of you that have submitted in the past will be familiar with this framework. It provides for one benefit cost evaluation, as well as some planning factors that are sometimes quantitative, sometimes qualitative. We worked very hard with our subcommittees to provide an easy-to-use rubric for each question. So most of them are, in fact, are yes, no's. with additional documentation to back up that response. A couple of them provide for various levels of performance, but the points assigned are always given so that sponsors understand how their project will be evaluated and how they need to demonstrate or document the background supporting information. And I apologize, we're not able to actually link to documents within the webinar itself. So I'm just going to take just a moment to show you how to get to this information on our website. Okay, from the main H-GAC website, you can actually use our search bar. It works pretty well. It's powered by Google, so sometimes the results aren't perfect, but it works pretty well. In fact, I'm just going to put in 2015 tip. And I hope that you can actually see this on the screen. Sometimes the graphics don't, the overlay graphics don't show up through the webinar platforms, but the very first hit here is a link to the 2015 tip call for projects website. And the application materials provides the evaluation criteria that I was just discussing. So there's roadway and mobility, ITS, transit, bicycle pedestrian, and livable centers projects as well have individual evaluation criteria that has been developed for them. There is a question that I see here asking for the preferred benefit cost evaluation for LCI and PED bike projects. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it just now. I see another comment saying they can't hear me okay. Hopefully that is cleared up. Somebody else can chime in if not. But LCI and bike PED projects will utilize a common benefit cost evaluation that in fact H-GAC can provide. We'll be asking for the project, kind of the narrative, the description of what a project will do, along with a map or GIS information regarding the project location, and we will use that to perform the benefit cost analysis. I'll cover that in a little more detail on how to ask for that assistance in just a couple of slides. All right, Jeff, I hope that you can hear me now and you're able to continue on with us in the presentation. In addition to the evaluation criteria, the scoring component of a project application, we are requesting information on project readiness and some questions that help us screen out projects that may not be ready for a funding commitment at this time. We're looking to retain previous readiness information and targets from our previous tip call in the area of environmental documentation and permitting, design, or under text language, the plan specifications and estimate packages, looking at the 30% design level and understanding the timing of when that is expected to be completed. Right-of-way and property acquisition and utility coordination. Again, these are really key pieces of information to understand the project schedule and obstacles that may exist to its implementation. One change from our previous call, in the past, if you weren't already within the correct time frame of the plan, as in you already had you were subject to conformity and you already had a local commitment, let's say, to build the project, we would not be able to make a funding commitment through our tip call. We recognize that the challenges that posed to sponsors and to our process. So we are going to be considering all projects in this tip call. However, if an adjustment to our conformity process is necessary to advance or include a project in the tip and plan, construction funding may not be available in the early years to implement that project. It may be in year 3, 4, 5, or 6 or something like that if conformity update would be required. That's a process that hopefully our streamlining efforts with our federal and state partners are effective, and we cut that down to a 3 or 4 month process, but right now that is typically a 6+ month process to update conformity, and we want to make sure that we're not making a construction commitment in a time frame that basically guarantees the project won't be able to meet it. We do look for commitment documentation regarding financial support and the concurrence of local governments or adjacent areas that may be affected. I'll cover this in a little bit more detail later on with the funding piece. We're having a new funding plan that we're asking for. But in general, we're looking for an action from the agency that is responsible for making the application through the council, court, or a board resolution, as well as anything they may have already acted on to commit resources, such as an adopted financial budget or a CIP or something like that. We will also accept letters from officials with executive control. That really means essentially able to commit the resources of that entity without any other consultation with their boards or councils. So that's pretty unique, but we will accept that as well. Same thing is true for in the case of an impact to another adjacent agency or say a management district is improving a city street. Having that communication is essential as well. I mentioned previously scheduling of these project scoping meetings with TxDOT. That is a new area to look at readiness of projects, and it will really help us better understand right on the front end, even before a funding commitment is made, what are going to be the key milestones and challenges towards delivering the project, just so that we can appropriately, if a funding commitment is made, that we do it in the right time frame. And project sponsors are on the same page, and TxDOT's on the same page about what resources will be needed to develop the project, so that we don't have a funding commitment and then 9 months goes by with no work on the agreement and no work on the environmental documentation, when that was really critical to making the letting on time. Also looking for some information on public involvement activities that may have occurred for the project. Really just a summary of previous activities and anything that's planned or expected to occur in the near future. Not really necessarily I'm going to do an EA and I'm going to do a public hearing as part of that. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. This would be any engagement with the neighborhoods or other property owners, business owners, that kind of thing, as well as interactions with the council and other areas to just understand what kind of local engagement has occurred and where there may be some issues that may come up during our process. It is important. We've had issues in each of our last few calls with projects that have had some issues with constituents not supporting a project. And if we can document that interaction has occurred before a call application has been made and that accommodations for that issue have been incorporated within the project, it's much easier for the policy council to stand behind a local government in that scenario than if no information is available and folks with an issue with the project come to the final selection meeting and say, this is a terrible project and it's going to cause all these terrible benefits to me and my neighbors, and 200 people are signing this document. It really presents a challenge to the policy council to support the local government. We are also asking for a financial plan information, and again I'll cover this in more detail in a couple of slides, really just to understand what resources are necessary to develop and implement a project and the current state of that commitment, so we understand if we're relying on future bond funds to match the construction of the project, what's the timeline for that likely bond election, how successful have they been in the past, what are the potential issues there. Just again to highlight for both the Policy Council and the sponsors what's really going to be needed to bring the project to implementation on time. We do provide some target dates for project implementation, our project development activities, really milestones. We have added as a new one here the project agreement execution. Again, with TxDOT, before the agreement is executed, they can't work on design review, review plan sets, approve environmental documents, that kind of thing. So it is very important that the project agreement move forward on an early schedule. So we're looking at really the year before a project is scheduled for construction, having that agreement in place as a target date. So for example, a project that may be receiving funding for construction in 2017, in fact it would be September 1st of 2015 that we'd be looking for what the status of that project agreement is. Likewise, with 30% design, looking for that to be in place about 8 months before a letting fiscal year begins, environmental clearance 5 months before the letting fiscal year, and right-of-way acquisition and any other permits required at the beginning of the letting fiscal year. Again, this is trying to set us up to take advantage of lower letting volumes early in the fiscal year. We oftentimes are trying to chase the very end of a fiscal year, and letting volumes are very high between really May and August, and that can often drive up costs to projects. And quite frankly, there's so much work for TxDOT and federal partners to work through. We can introduce delays there too when we're really trying to chase the letting in August, for example. We'd much prefer to focus on a couple months later and delivering a project in October and November. And then if a schedule needs to slip a little bit, we have the ability to balance our lettings a little bit as well to take advantage of the full year. Mentioned before the financial plan and how this may be a little different from what you've seen in the past. We're not looking to be onerous here, just to understand for those major investments, a budget by year that indicates the sources that are committed, anticipated, or requested through the TIP call, and the status of that commitment. And this needs to include both project development and implementation activities. I've got an example on the next slide from the City of Houston, from their CIP, that really kind of just illustrates this pretty basic information. Other investments, a little less information needed, not a year-by-year breakdown, but a basic budget for the project, and of course including development and construction activities, including local source information and the status of that commitment. All projects need to have a current estimate of the implementation cost. This is very important. If you've done a plan and are trying to implement a recommendation out of it, if it's a 5 or 6 year old document, there's been a lot of inflation in construction costs, and we need to make sure, even in the last few months, since early in the calendar year till now, there's been quite a bit of escalation, and we need to make sure we're looking at current costs. At the end of this presentation, I'll show you where to find TxDOT cost information, but it's okay if you're relying on your own lettings. If you let a fair number of projects, like the City of Houston, for example, could rely on their own experiences on what commodity prices might be. In addition, those of you that may be seeking to use transportation development credits in lieu of local cash for the match, an application is required under our TDC policy at the time you're requesting funding. So if you need a TDC application, that will also be provided on our website. Again, not to spend a whole lot of time on that, but TDCs allow for the use of these credits, which are not cash, in lieu of a local match, essentially making the project more than an 80% and perhaps 100% federal funded project. We have a TDC policy in place that identifies the priority uses for those credits, and it's not every project, so it'll be important for you to review that and understand if TDCs are a useful tool to you or not. In addition, projects with a major operating component to them, typically there's going to be transit or ITS projects where we may build or construct or purchase a capital asset that really needs to be operated, and that's a significant component of providing a service. We're looking for a 5-year annual operating budget. Again, like the major investment above, looking at what sources are committed, anticipated, or requested, and the status of that commitment. I'll just highlight here on the transit side, for example, a new transit service may be looking to utilize 5307 funds to support its annual operations, and we need to understand if other parties are involved in a decision regarding those funds, what the eligibility might be, and that kind of thing. So again, it really helps highlight for us where there may be additional coordination and consultation that's necessary to make sure we don't basically build an asset that we're having a difficult time operating. And this is the example for the City of Houston CIP. I'm not sure if the resolution works great through the webinar. You can Google the City of Houston CIP and find their pretty good breakdowns here. For each project has a pull sheet that has the description on it. We don't care so much about that, but the bottom half of the screen illustrates a breakdown by project activity and years, and then below that what funds are being applied or anticipated for the project. In this example, this is the Tanner Road project, and I do believe I heard from the city at our workshop earlier this week this is likely a project they're going to submit to us. And so you can see in the 2017 column for construction a proposed TxDOT amount as what they're requesting or potentially maybe requesting through the TIP call, as well as the source of the match being the Metro Mobility Program, the 1-cent sales tax portion that comes back to the city, as well as the drainage fee, that street and traffic control storm drain fee as well. So that's the kind of information we'd be looking for on the major investment financial plan. Again, our process is driven by sponsors really communicating the benefits of their project. That's what we think is important. It's not necessarily an H-GAC led evaluation. We want the sponsors to clearly document and communicate the value of their projects. So each application is really a series of questions seeking information about the benefits of the project. So the evaluation is a key part of that. On the benefit cost side, it's a pretty detailed analysis. Where we're most interested is making sure that common assumptions are being used for economic values. So that would be the value of time, for example, on a delay analysis. Inflation factors, we'll have a standardized percentage for, basically taking future benefits and discounting them to the current day so that we can compare them to the implementation cost of the project, that kind of thing. H-GAC assistance is available and required in a couple of instances. We do have the capability to provide some modeling support for added capacity projects that may be a little limited this time. We're working through our long-range plan and other important priorities, and our modeling process has, quite frankly, gotten more complex, takes longer to run. So if you need that assistance, it'll be important to know about it early. I'll talk about the schedule in just a moment. For ITS projects, we utilize a regional model called IDAS, and it allows us to estimate the benefits of ITS infrastructure deployments. So again, we'll be looking to get some early information from project sponsors so that we can run that model and get the results back to you. And as I mentioned before, bicycle, pedestrian, and LCI projects use an GIS-driven automated analysis that our community environmental group will assist with. And again, it really just demonstrates the potential to convert essentially auto trips to other modes. And it's a pretty standardized format that we can use to support the applications. In addition to the benefit cost, again, there's the planning factor or narrative component of the application. And again, we're really looking for a response to the question on the planning factors, along with the justification for the selection of the points. So again, we have a lot more information on how many points are relevant for each question and for each response, but we do need to have the support to be able to confirm that the project does, in fact, provide the benefit that's being asserted. We will be providing on the TIP call website templates for the financial plan. And for benefit cost analyses, I think I saw a question earlier pop up in our question panel about that. So we'll be providing some basic templates for you to use. We recognize some projects may not quite fit within that, and we can work with you to make some tweaks, as well as a guidance document for benefit cost analyses. This will largely be drawn from, again, the USDOT Tiger guidance. So those of you that are familiar with that process, you already kind of know what to expect there. And we'll also be able to provide data both from the travel demand model. We'll be able to give you some static outputs already for near-term and future volumes and capacities on our transportation network. So those of you that may be looking at doing an access management or intersection improvement, you can look at the volumes coming out of those networks to feed into your synchro analysis or something like that. We also have safety data, crash information. We cannot make that broadly available. We can release it for project purposes to local governments. It's our agreement with TxDOT on that. So we will be able to help supply that information on a request basis for projects that are really, again, targeting safety issues. We're trying not to allow or encourage folks to evaluate the projects 5 different ways. Really, some of the questions that we'll ask will help narrow down for sponsors what the key benefits of a project are and focus their analysis on those, really that key benefit. I did mention H-GAC Assistance is available during the application period. And just so that we can ensure that we can help folks on an equitable basis, we need to arrange this in advance. We put down here a minimum of 15 business days. So basically, if you're looking for assistance, we need to know by Thanksgiving. So November 24th, I think, is the Monday or Tuesday before Thanksgiving. You can request the assistance by email. Again, I mentioned this is an online application. So when you complete the first portion of the application, I'll walk through this in just a moment, it'll give you a project application number, and so we'll just need that to reference back to the project. You will have had to go in and complete the project narrative that will communicate the need. So what is the problem that's being addressed, the purpose of the project, what are the key objectives the project needs to provide to satisfy the need, as well as the basic description. So, limits, location, how much are we widening from 2 to 4 lanes, are we including drainage, that kind of stuff. We also ask for a GIS layer is best, or PDF map, but that will allow us to know the location. So the scope and the location information will allow us to move forward with the request for assistance in the benefit cost analysis area in particular. In general, this is a real high-level overview. Again, they'll have a more detailed document posted shortly. The period of analysis is really the lesser of 20 years or the service life of a project. So there may be some safety or ITS projects or something like that where the intended lifetime is 10 years or something like that. So that's the appropriate period of analysis for that investment. But otherwise, we're looking at standardizing the evaluation at 20 years, just so all the projects are being considered on equal footing. Again, we'll be providing economic values that are tied to primarily the USDOT Tiger guidance, and those will be available in the Excel templates as well. I did want to highlight a key distinction between what we'll be looking to do and what some of you, particularly consultants, may have been familiar with on TxDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program. We do look or encourage you to use TxDOT's HSIP work codes, so that would identify the level of crash reduction, for example, that a particular improvement may provide. However, we are looking for a little more, a bigger analysis for the benefits. Again, tie back to the Tiger analysis that gives us, hopefully, it'll actually be a bigger value benefit to the project. And we will be providing, since that AIS severity stratification is different than the information you get out of TxDOT's database. We'll be providing that conversion within the Excel template as well. Within the application process, again, looking at that due date being December 15th, we'll again monitor that, see if there are any issues with that being the deadline date, and make an adjustment if necessary. But right now, do not see that being necessary. It's an online web application. In addition, there will be a number of attachments you'll need. There will be a signed submission form template. A transmittal letter will serve in that function if it contains the requisite information. Just that in cases where a consultant may be submitting an application or a staff member is submitting it, that we have really the documentation that the appropriate officials from the agency have, are validating and affirming the application. It also include, again, the GIS and detailed map information, as well as supporting documentation that may be necessary. There'll be Excel templates for the most part, but will also allow you to submit. You may have information from a public meeting, exhibits or something like that, a design schematic or something like that to help communicate how access will be changed. Those kind of things we'll be able to attach to the application as well. There is a question there I see for the GIS map. Sorry, I'm moving away from the microphone. What other information, data sets, or shapefiles in addition to the project limits do we need to include? I will tell you the application will kind of walk you through some of that, but if we're looking for example, on BikePed, there are a couple of questions about connections to existing bicycle pedestrian trails or to transit. Those are the kind of elements that will be very useful to include within the map. It's not a hard and fast thing, but again, it's documentation supporting the selection of the planning factor, the points that are assigned. If you can do it through the map, that's obviously a great way to communicate the benefit of the project and that it satisfies that point assignment. So what are we going to do about projects that the application may have a hole in it or maybe missing some information? If it's substantially complete, the remedy period is 10 business days, so that would continue after the application deadline. Ideally, if folks have their applications in earlier, we can work through that 60-day process to address any issues earlier than this. But this is the process for applications that are submitted on the 15th. I will say, this is not intended to allow folks pretty much to sign in, put a minimal amount of information in there and submit it, and then be able to use the next 10 days to complete their application. If it's not substantially complete, then this is really not the remedy period. That is really not applicable to that scenario. So again, if there are issues after the initial review, we'll alert you with that designated representative where there are application deficiencies and how to follow up on those. Okay, the first thing you'll fill out on our website is a pre-application, and I'll demonstrate this in just a moment. But it's basically the contact information and just enough information to understand what application form you'll be using, whether that's a major investment or which type of other investment you'll be utilizing. And it will also give you the login credentials to come back and complete your application. I'm going to see if this link works. And please don't pay attention to the bar up there. That is not the correct address. It probably will be totally different. So don't try to fill it out now. It's still a work in progress. But just for example, we'll fill this in with my information. Go to the next page, ask a couple more information. So again, that first page might be if it was the consultant filling that out, they'd indicate that's who they were. The main contact for the agency will be provided here. So that's just for the sake of putting something else here. Put Alan's information in here. All right, and then these are some basic information questions that we've asked on previous calls. Just to understand if a previous application had been submitted, and is it requesting really a minimum amount of federal funds or really minimum amount of funding that it's really worth it to go through the application and the agreement process with TxDOT. And then the joint project will allow you to enter in additional agency contacts, which is always great. We would anticipate some projects may have a number of partners that are involved in the funding and implementation of it. So for example, let's just say a project that would continue our sub-regional planning initiatives. Is the project qualify for the use of a categorical exclusion? Again, I would highlight this question came up during our workshop. What if I've already completed an environmental document and say it's an EA? Would I still qualify here? And I would draw your attention to we really are focused on, does it qualify for the use of the categorical exclusion? And not in the past that may not have applied, but today it would. And this secondary question will be moving to the core of the application. We will be asking which CE is appropriate. So in this case, it will be activities do not lead directly to construction. And the proposed analysis exempt from conformity, yes. So again, for these other investments, projects which are eligible for the use of a CE and are exempt from conformity, it'll be another investment, and you would select the appropriate application that you'll be completing. Roadway mobility, for most roadway projects, or freight and that kind of thing. ITS investments, transit, pedestrian bicycle, or livable centers. In this case, it's a planning project, so we'll just say that it applies to the roadway, and we'll hit submit. We'll notice that the application has been received. And then just to show you what the system does for you. All right, it has sent me an email confirmation. I hope you can kind of read this, but it gives you a link back to complete the application. It gives you an indication of the project title, what the application, again, that application ID, and the password that you'll use as the credential to get into the application system. We do apologize. This is not a system that allows an agency to have one logon and all their applications fall under it. The credentials are by project. So if your agency has more than one application, in fact, a number of you may have a fair number of them, we'd encourage you to use an Excel form or something to capture the title and application credentials so that you can come back and keep all of that information straight for all the individuals that may be working on your application. Again, here's this general schedule. Application period will be open through the middle of December. We'll be following up in December and January with any additional information that may be needed. And again, those major investment scoping meetings. In February, we'll have the TIP subcommittee come back and develop recommendations based on that evaluation. And the comment period will follow with TPC approval, ideally in April. Again, to highlight for you all, I'll leave this here for just a moment. We'll have weekly Q&A webinars. Since you all have already registered for this event, even if you weren't on our initial distribution list, we'll make sure you receive the invite for these webinars as well. It'll probably just be a recurring one, so you get one that'll just tell you that there's all of these events available to you, and you can sign in for each of them. Again, Mondays at 2 p.m. Except for that November 4th date. And again, if any of these have to change, we'll let you know as far in advance as possible. For more information, again, our TIP website has a link to the Call for Projects page on it, hgac.com/TAQ, that's Transportation Air Quality, /TIP. I am the contact, your primary contact for H-GAC. My email address and phone number are provided there. I think most folks know how to reach me. If you do need to interact with TxDOT in preparing your application, for example, you are submitting a project that improves an on-system a state highway, and you need the concurrence of TxDOT, Catherine McCrite will be your primary contact, and her email address is catherine.mccrite@txdot.gov, and her phone number is 713-802-5812. And that completes the slides that I have for you guys to look at. I did note before we go into Q&A that I would show you where the low bid information is on TxDOT's website. Again, I use their search function pretty heavily, so if we go back to the TxDOT main page and enter in bid prices in the search bar, the first hit is usually the correct one, and this takes you to the page that will give you the statewide 3-month rolling averages, as well as information on each district's bid experience. So if we went into Houston, for example, it'll give you all the bid items, what the most recent letting month, which is September, how much quantity was procured and what the average price was, as well as the 12-month moving average. In addition, TxDOT does have, I'm not seeing it here, the Highway Construction Index, just so that you can get an idea of what the bid prices are like over the last several months. I think that may be off for the second hit. There we go, Highway Cost Index, so you could search for Highway Cost Index as well. And they update these each month. So you can really see, this goes all the way back to 1998. For those of you that were working on developing projects in the 2005 to 2008 time period, I remember how volatile and really aggressive the spike in prices was, really the latter half of 2007 into 2008. You can see we're in a similar kind of scenario today, a big spike this spring, and these price levels are actually higher than they were then. So again, if you had a study that included costs from a number of years ago, it's important to understand how they may have changed before you make an application to us. Okay, I think now we'll try to move into our Q&A section. I will look to see if anybody has their hand raised on the attendee list. So look to see that. I'll go through the questions first that may be posted to our the question interface. So if you have an additional question, please type it in or raise your hand. There's a question on the Environmental Justice Index portion of the benefit cost, and it's not benefit cost, of the bicycle pedestrian evaluation. In fact, I can bring that up so you can see that. So a portion of the benefit cost, or of the planning factor assessment for bicycle pedestrian projects and LCI projects is this question. Is a part or all of the project located within census tracts that has a higher proportion of these typically underserved populations, minority, low income, senior, low limited education, zero auto, female head of household, or limited English proficiency, and then assigns project points based on how many of those really different groups are prevalent within the project area. I will say that is an evaluation that we can provide, again, based on that GIS analysis or that GIS shapefile that you give us. We can perform this and give you back the information to utilize in your application. So again, it's most useful if you can enter the basic information in your application, including the map or GIS shapefile, and then we can follow up with both the benefit cost and the underserved population access questions for bicycle, pedestrian, and livable centers projects. All right. All right, I see a question here that if a project involves reconstruction of the roadway, the existing roadway, not adding capacity, in conjunction with back of curb work, can it be applied for under the LCI, or must all projects involving roadway reconstruction be applied for under the major mobility category? Again, this goes back to that CE eligibility question, and part of the question there will be where the right-of-way line may be for the particular corridor in question. Also the size of the project. For those of you that aren't aware, there was a new provision in MAP 21 that allowed projects seeking limited federal funds to be processed as CEs. And I believe that's $5 million is the limit there. If it's seeking less than that amount, a CE can be used. Caution there, that doesn't mean you should go for a project that needs exactly $5 million. Any adjustment over that would essentially nullify the environmental document. But if you had a project that was really, a $4 million project that we're improving a particular block or something, that would be one way that can move forward. Again, so if there are particular questions on projects, we'd be more than happy to discuss them with you or direct you to the right resources to make that, in particular, the environmental determination. Okay. Again, I see a question here about primarily the BCA calculation. We will be providing some Excel spreadsheets and really guidance on how to utilize them. I would say they're not posted just yet. Still drafting that document for you guys. But I think our first weekly Q&A will probably spend quite a bit of time discussing that. So if you want to make sure you pencil in on your calendar the 20th, that would be a great time to come back with any questions you may have there. I think it'll make a lot of sense once you see it, probably early next week. The particular question asks what data the agency needs to provide. That will depend on the project. For project types that H-GAC is performing the analysis, again, so ITS, bicycle pedestrian, LCI, what we primarily need are the location information and the project scope information. In other areas, we can provide some assistance with model output information for like a widening of a corridor or something like that. However, the sponsors will need to do the evaluation, and we can direct you to some resources. The guidance will do that as well, but the sponsors will be primarily responsible for performing the benefit cost analysis. We will review it and then ask any follow-up questions that are pertinent. This is a good question. For those areas that H-GAC will complete, do you need to request assistance in advance, or we'll do it automatically? I would say you need to request it in advance. It's a core part of the application. So again, really those 15-day lead time is important to make sure that we have it in there and we can process it. Again, we're in the middle of the holidays, so assuming that HGAC will be able to provide additional support really in the latter half of December to complete or follow up an application is not realistic. We need to make sure that we know in advance. So thank you very much for that question. I see a question on the 20 years. Again, that's a benefit cost evaluation question, and really that's to provide a standard framework for project evaluation. That doesn't really change the answer per se. We're just clipping it off at 20 years. So a project with strong benefits will still show a strong benefit. I don't know that the time period really alters things too much, and it aligns with the time frame of the plan, so that we're not going well beyond the time period of our RTP in estimating the benefits from a project. All right, I'm going to see if anybody's hands are up. I can unmute folks if somebody has an audio or an oral question they would like to ask if you raise your hand. Otherwise, the typing seems to work pretty well. Yeah, there was a question about will the presentation be available with audio. Yeah, a recording of the webinar will be posted to the website along with the just the slides themselves. All right, I'm seeing a question about a fueling station. It's a probably pretty technical question involving public access to that facility. I think that's something we'll have to take offline, unfortunately. However, in general terms, the use of the funds we're talking about have some restrictions on public access, so we'll need to be cognizant of that, and any kind of refueling or other, electrification or something like that infrastructure project that we consider. But we'll follow up with you on that question. I see a question from TxDOT on will sponsors be identifying the source of funds we're requesting? Yes, that's part of the financial plan. Again, it's a financial plan. It's not a in blood never to change commitment. It is just this is how we intend to provide those necessary resources, and how what steps may be necessary for them to be available. On the case of the TxDOT side, most of these sources, there's a presumed match that the state can provide. It gets a little more difficult when we're talking about some of the bond funds or something like that. Fortunately, this time around, we don't have a lot of those resources available. Proposition 1 is likely to be a different animal in that regard. Okay, sorry, I misread the question from TxDOT. No, we do not need to know which type of funding you are seeking. We're trying to evaluate the best projects for the region, and then HGAC will work with TxDOT to identify the most appropriate and available funding source for that project. Again, our criteria really isn't designed around funding sources. It's designed around project types. So we want to know what the best ITS projects are, and if that happens to be a project that's not eligible for congestion mitigation air quality funds, for example, we would use STP funds for that project. And yes, there is a follow-up. If an applicant has several projects, will they need to request support separately? I mean, we need to have that request come in for all the projects that references that. I would be reluctant to say, send us an email that lists 15 projects, but I don't think that needs to go so extreme as to say, one letter per project. But I think we can work with you on that. All right. I'm not seeing anybody's hands raised through the interface. So if you wanted to speak, you could also put a note in the chat box or in the question. All right. I do see a question that I had scrolled past that asked if management districts are eligible to apply. This is a good area of inquiry. What agencies are eligible to submit an application? The general guideline is you have to be able to enter into a contract with TxDOT or be a grantee with the Federal Transit Administration, really more the former than the latter. So management districts, yes, are eligible to enter into contracts with TxDOT. Just as an example for folks, there may be a tax increment reinvestment zone, a TIRZ, in that location. TIRZs are creatures of the city, and the city would be the legal entity there, not the TIRZ. So we would expect an application from the city if it were really a TIRZ-led project. In most of those cases, there's a management district that is also associated with the area, and they would be eligible to submit a project. Again, I would highlight for any management districts within the city of Houston, they do have a review process involved, and I will, if you put a note in here, I can make sure that we get you the contact information. In fact, I may try to bring it up really quick. All right, for those of you that need to coordinate with the City of Houston, I'm going to stick Anna Cedillo's contact information on a slide. All right, so your contact again with the City of Houston is Anna Cedillo with the City of Houston's Planning and Development Department, and you can see her contact information on the screen. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions that we haven't already discussed. So thank you all very, very much. I appreciate your participation. Again, we'll be sending out a notice to you all about the weekly Q&A session on the 20th, probably early next week. So again, thank you all very, very much. If there are any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and close our webinar. Thank you very much.